If you're an athlete who throws, a pitcher, a quarterback, anyone like that, your arm is everything. It's your entire craft. But that same incredible speed and constant motion that makes you great also puts you on a knife's edge, always at risk for a career-changing injury. So today, we're going to follow that whole journey, right from that awful moment of injury, through all the tough decisions, and all the way down that long road back to the game.
It's the sound every single throwing athlete dreads. You know the one. That sharp, sudden pop in your elbow, or that searing pain in your shoulder in the middle of a throw. It's just a heart-stopping moment that brings up the one question you never want to ask. Is my season over, or is my career?
You see, a powerful throw uses your whole body. It's this kinetic chain starting from your feet. But all of that force gets funneled and then, boom, unleashed through the arm. And that puts an unbelievable amount of stress on two main areas: the inside of the elbow, home to the ulnar collateral ligament, and the super complex machinery of the shoulder, things like the rotator cuff and the labrum.
Okay, let's zoom in on that one ligament, the UCL, because it is absolutely critical. The best way to think of it is like a crucial internal brace for your elbow. When your arm whips forward in a throw, there's this massive force, it's called valgus stress, that's basically trying to rip the elbow open. And the UCL, it takes on up to 54% of that force. It's pretty much the main thing holding your elbow together when you're throwing heat.
So once the doctors have a look and the injury is diagnosed, whether it's a UCL tear or something in the shoulder, the athlete hits a huge fork in the road. And right away, they and their medical team have to make the first massive decision. Do we try to rehab this, or is it time to go under the knife?
There are really two clear paths here. On one hand, you've got the non-operative route. This is usually the first thing you try, especially for tears that aren't a complete rupture. It's all about strategic rest and a whole lot of physical therapy. You could be back in the game in just a few months. But on the other hand, if the tear is complete or rehab just isn't cutting it, then you're looking at surgery, a much more serious and much longer path to recovery.
So who's the best candidate for trying to avoid surgery? Well, the research points to a few specific groups. Obviously, athletes who only have a partial tear often do really well with just rehab. It's also the go-to for younger adolescent athletes because you don't want to mess with their growth plates. And, for some older high school or college athletes who are close to hanging it up, that super long recovery from surgery just might not be worth it.
But look, for an elite pitcher or a top-tier quarterback who has a complete tear and wants to get back to 100%, that rehab-only path often isn't going to be enough. When that internal brace in the elbow is completely snapped, surgery is usually the only way to get back the stability you need to perform at that top level.
All right, so if surgery is the call, what does that actually mean? What does it look like? When an athlete with an elbow injury chooses this path, they're usually signing up for one of the most famous procedures in all of sports.
I'm sure you've heard the name, Tommy John surgery. But what is it, really? Well, it's a complete reconstruction. A surgeon literally builds a new ligament. They take a tendon they don't really need, maybe from the patient's forearm or hamstring, and they weave it through tunnels they've drilled in the arm bones. It's an incredible piece of biological engineering, creating a brand new UCL from scratch.
Now, if you're an athlete facing this right here, this is the number that gives you hope. A huge review of over 2,000 athletes found that an incredible 83% of baseball players who get Tommy John surgery come back to play at the same or sometimes an even higher level. The takeaway is simple: it works.
But, and this is a big but, that success comes with a price. And that price is time. A lot of time. That new ligament needs months and months just to heal. And then comes the even longer process of strengthening and retraining the arm. We're not talking weeks here. We are talking about a grueling 10 to 18-month marathon before an athlete is even close to ready for a real game.
The surgery itself, that's really just a starting line. The real work, the day in, day out grind that truly determines if this whole thing is a success, that happens now, on the comeback trail. This is all about the rehab process.
And rehab is an incredibly structured process, broken down into phases. It all starts with the acute phase, right after surgery, where the only goal is to protect the arm, get the swelling down, and get basic function back. Then you slowly move into the intermediate and advanced stages, where you're rebuilding all that lost strength and balance. And only when you've checked all the boxes do you even think about that final phase, actually returning to your sport.
And that return is just as structured. They don't just toss you a ball and say, "Good luck." No way. Athletes start what's called an interval throwing program. It begins with just light tossing, maybe 50% effort. Then you slowly, carefully progress to pitching off a mound, then more intense sessions, and finally, a simulated game.
Every single step is based on hitting specific criteria to make sure the arm can handle the next jump in stress.
And that brings us to the absolute golden rule of this entire recovery process, and the research puts it perfectly. Athletes should not be progressed too quickly, and a criteria-based progression should be followed. The single biggest risk during this whole comeback is trying to do too much too soon. Patience isn't just a good idea here, it is an absolute requirement.
So we've walked through the whole cycle, from injury to recovery. But honestly, the most important chapter in this whole story is the one we write before that pop ever happens. How do we keep our athletes healthy and on the field to begin with? The ultimate goal always has to be prevention.
All the big sports medicine groups have identified a few key pillars for prevention. We're talking about smart workload management like pitch counts. We're talking about conditioning the entire body. Remember that kinetic chain? Not just the arm. It means making sure throwing mechanics are clean to reduce stress. And this one is huge. It means telling young athletes to avoid playing one sport year-round, so their bodies actually have time to rest.
And managing that workload isn't just some vague concept. It can be super specific. Look at this table. It's based on recommendations from Major League Baseball and USA Baseball. It gives you concrete, evidence-based rules for how many pitches kids should throw and how many rest days they need, all broken down by age. This is such a powerful tool for coaches and parents to protect those young arms.
And the main takeaway from all this is simple. This stuff works. It's not a guess. Study after study has shown that when youth teams actually do these simple prevention programs, like specific warm-ups and exercises, they see a major drop in arm injuries. Being proactive makes a real difference.
And that really leaves us with this final, crucial question. With kids specializing in one sport earlier than ever, and the pressure to perform getting more intense at younger and younger ages, we have to look in the mirror and ask, are we, as coaches, as parents, as fans, doing everything we can to protect these young athletes, or is the culture of youth sports today pushing them past their limits and right toward the exact injuries we've just been talking about?